Hey everyone, this is Kim Bowen with The Marriage Place, and this is our second edition of Kim Chats With, and we are doing something really different today that I think will be fun and hopefully really interesting and relevant to all of you that are watching who have kids at home and trying to navigate all the homeschooling and dealing with your kids being around all the time and trying to keep your sanity and and keep your kids educated if possible. So let me introduce, we have a group here today, which is something we've never done before. We're just going to give this a shot, see how it goes. I've got Dominie O'Neill here. Dominie is our specialist who's going to be talking with us today. Dominie is a licensed clinical social worker who has a private practice and also works in a school with children. What ages are you mostly?
Yeah, so in the school that I'm in right now, it's an elementary school, so it's K through 5. My private practice is a little older, all the way through to high school, but over my career, I've worked K through 12. And I am at home right now trying to do my private practice from home, trying to support school from home as the counselor from a school and be the mother of 2 teenagers who are trying to homeschool. So I definitely kind of feel that balance right now too.
So you're feeling everybody's pain right there in your home yard too. And so we've also got on the call 2 employees at the Marriage Place who I thought would be a great addition to this call because they're in the trenches too. My kids are mostly grown, and I felt like this would be really relevant. So we've got Kelly Coviello on my screen. She's on the top left. Hi, Kelly.
Hello.
Kelly's our director of marketing, and she is in Massachusetts also.
Yes, and I have a son, Jack, who is 9. He is in 4th grade.
Okay, good. And then we've got Becca down in the far right. Hi,
Hello.
Becca.
Hi.
Hi, Becca's my operations manager. She lives here in Texas, so we'll have the Southern twang over here in the conversation. And Becca, tell us about your kids.
I have 2, and Savvy is 12 and Marshall is 10.
Is 10.
Yeah.
Okay. And so everybody's been trying to do what?
6th and 4th.
6th and 4th grade. And so everybody's trying to homeschool now for how long? How long has this been going on?
Is this week 4?
Yeah. Yeah, it feels longer, but yeah.
It feels longer. Yeah, it does. I'm hearing a lot of people say that these days. So, Dominie, what I'm hearing from clients and employees, we meet as a group every week and we're, talking about how we're doing and what we're struggling with. And the conversation keeps coming up about kids and how overwhelmed my team is with trying to work and, keep their marriage in a healthy place and all the stuff that goes on with having kids. I mean, even if you weren't homeschooling, it would be overwhelming. But now you're getting dumped with all of these tasks.
Yeah.
Right. So tell us how to do this. How can we make this easier?
I think one of the big things is taking a step back, taking a minute and thinking as a family unit, because that's how we're functioning right now is, whichever combination of people are living in your home, what your priorities are and what's important to you as a family. Because I think we're all getting a lot of different things thrown at us that we're being asked to do in a day, as you said, be a parent, be an employee, be a spouse, and all of those things really can't happen all exactly at the same time all day long. So, I think one thing that I talk with clients about, parents at school, and for myself is kind of setting up a schedule. Some schools are doing that and some schools are kind of leaving it a little bit more open, but thinking about for your kids, the age that they are and who they are, what's going to work for them and what's going to work for them balanced with what you need to accomplish. So if you have younger kids and you have work calls in the morning, be okay saying, you know what, my kids are going to do the homeschooling later in the day when I can be available. And in the morning, they're going to watch a movie and, play outside or whatever works. And I think also sharing with employers a little bit about what goes on for you, obviously keeping your privacy, but being able to say, I need to let you know if I'm on this call, there's a chance that my kid might pop in. And so kind of sharing a little bit, we're used to keeping those things so separate.
Yeah.
But I think the reality right now is we have to be a little bit more open. So I would say prioritize, schedule what you can. And I think some kids need to know when it's the weekend and when it's the school week as well. And that difference, like you might sleep a little later if it's the weekend. And then as and how you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more information about what's going on for you with employers so that they can be supportive, because I do think that that's the majority of parents I've spoken to. Employers are very supportive, want to work with parents, but if they don't know how to accommodate that. So
right, that sounds like good advice.
Yeah, Dominie, I have a question. How do we talk to our kids about what's going on? How much information do we give them?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think the first answer is a couple things. It absolutely depends on the age of your child, obviously, and who they are individually, because you might have kids of similar age and they might have very different ways of kind of being in the world. So you've got to consider that. A few general rules of thumb. Kids are really great. They often only ask the questions that they want the answers to. So if you have a kid who's not saying a whole lot about anything, it's not to be ignored, but it might mean that they feel like they've got what they need. If you have a child who's asking a lot of questions, then it's worth thinking about those questions, being thoughtful, and kind of giving age-appropriate, thoughtful answers. In general, especially for younger kids, I suggest that if you're going to have those conversations that might prompt a little worry or follow-up conversation, to do it earlier in the day. Those conversations are not great. Sort of even dinner time can be getting a little close to bedtime. So I often say, maybe it's a morning conversation, or if you're, able to go out for a walk, but answer what they ask. And again, think as a family, what is it that we want our kids to know about this? What is it we want our kids to learn about this? And kind of shape your answers based on that as well.
Do your kids, are your kids asking you what's going on in the world?
They do. He does. He's trying to understand what's happening. I think one of the hardest things is him really understanding why he can't see his friends, why he can't, when he does see them, he can't hug them. That's probably been, I think, the hardest thing for him.
In general, there are resources out there, and I'm sure, anybody who's on Facebook or anybody who's part of kind of a community, people are sharing things. I would always encourage parents to kind of look at those first, see if they think they make sense for their kids, but there can be some good kind of more generic resources. In general, if I'm thinking about a child who's his age, he asked you the question, how come I can't do that? And I think, talking to him about the fact that right now we all have this really important job, which is to take care of each other. And that right now there's this germ that is new. It's new to everybody. And when something's really new, we have to be extra careful until the scientists can learn more about it and figure out how to help us with it. And so what we're doing is taking care of ourselves and our families by doing our very best not to spread that germ. And the way you don't spread a germ is you kind of keep to yourself, you're at home a little bit more, and you wash your hands. So yeah, just kind of answering the questions he asks.
Yeah. One thing we're doing that's been really helpful is our school has, and I think it's the whole school, is kids are doing a passion project, right? And journaling what's happening right now, right? Because they're going to look back on this and what do they want to remember? And one of the things that we've done with Jack is his passion project is, so we've kind of combined his art with his passion project, with his writing assignments. So he's actually creating a comic called the Corona Chronicles. And so he's got to come up with these stories. So he's documenting what's happening. So it's really cool to see.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
it is great. I love the idea of a passion project because it also gives kids a little direction to kind of think about what they're really invested in and learn in that way, which is great.
Right.
Hey, Becca, you've got two, so in different grades, and I'm assuming all different sets of assignments and teachers to deal with and stuff.
Yeah, and very distinct personalities, which influence how they, tackle the projects. My son is very much the typical boy who's, how fast can I get this done? And move on to something I'd rather be doing. So he kind of knocks it out. And so my work with him is more about explaining why he has to do it sometime when he wants to push back, or just making sure he does his best work so he's not rushing through it. And then he's looking for something to do because he's bored. And then my daughter, who everything comes easy school-wise too, is particular. So it takes her all day sometimes to do stuff just because she wants to get it just right, and she takes lots of breaks. And so I find with her, it feels like I'm prodding, to get it all done. So when they're both wanting something at the same time, that's when it's hard, I think, as a parent, and then working as well to try to give them, it's not equal, but it's fair, give them each what they need when they need it. And I've got one child that's a fair kid. And so that's always fun, but it's not fair, but trying to give them each what they want but what they need, more importantly.
So Dominie, I think what's really great about what she just said, and I want you to comment on it, is how it's important to know each of your child's learning styles and what's going to work with each of them.
Yeah, very much so.
To do a single classroom and make everybody abide by the rules.
Yeah, no, I mean, very much so. And I think, again, it's a really difficult time. And kids also are, they're trying to process all of this information. And so one of the things we know, as educators in schools is that, we typically say whatever a child brings to school in their backpack, meaning whatever's going on in their life, is also coming into the classroom. We've sort of got the reverse right now where, whatever's going on in life in general, however they're feeling about, not seeing friends and not having their typical routine, and maybe, for some kids, disruption with parents being unwell or relatives, they're thinking about all of that while they're trying to do schoolwork as well. And so I think the first thing we have to all remember is that they've got a lot on their plates too. And so, when we're looking at schoolwork, the schoolwork is only going to be helpful if they're actually absorbing the information, right? If they're just kind of going through the motions, it's not as helpful. And so I think, talking with them and coming up with a plan together. And a lot of times, with parents and kids, parents will say, okay, well, this is what I want to have happen. And kids say, well, this is what I want to have happen. And there needs to be kind of a collaboration in the middle of, okay, how are we going to make our days look? What do you need? What do I need you to do? And how can we kind of make that happen? And then kind of see, and then play it out and say, we're going to try this for a week and then we'll talk again. I can, from personal experience with my teenage son, he was very much like, oh, I'll figure this out, Mom. I'll get it done. And, that's his style. And sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't. And so what we did was set up a schedule. And we talked about the fact that I was going to be busy with work, and that if he wasn't able to kind of get his stuff done, instead of being isolated in his bedroom doing it, which way he'd prefer to be, he'd need to be at the dining room table so that when I did come out for a glass of water, I could check on him. So I think, to your point, really thinking about each of your children, thinking about their learning styles, and having a conversation about what that would look like when they're learning from home. So for your daughter, it might be a little bit more, her day might look longer. Her day might be typically, 9:30 to 3:30 or 4, because she likes to take a break in between and be conscientious. And for your son, if he's a kid that needs to see that there's light at the end of the tunnel and my day is going to get done, and hey, from 1 o'clock on, that's going to be my time to go outside or do whatever else, his schedule time might look a little different. But I think a schedule is really important. And then the opportunity every day to check in and say, how did it go? What do you need help with? Or provide times through the day that are going to work for you. Because kids, the reality and the other conversation I'm having with lots of kids right now is they're used to teachers teaching them, and they're trying to learn on their own. And that's a big feat. And so they've got to let us know what they need, and we will find the resources, and teachers want to help, but they don't know if we don't share with them.
Yeah. Boredom kicks in. That's the other thing that I've noticed. The kids, they're just bored. I mean, Marshall doesn't want to play on the Xbox right now. I mean, he's just sick of screen time, which is kind of
that's unusual. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's
maybe.
But and just balancing the structure with the flexibility, because it's not the end of the world if they have less school right now. But the lack of structure is also challenging, and so
and I've spoken to several families through my private practice about essentially loosely scheduling every day. So even if even if schoolwork is completed, sort of what are the elements of a day that you hope for your child? And again, obviously that's going to vary by age, but for most kids, there are going to be some kind of schoolwork. hopefully some kind of physical activity. And that can really vary by child. But one thing that I've really been talking to kids about is, even if they're not a sports kid, they are a child who maybe walked to a bus stop, walked around their school building, moved around if they went to do errands with their parents. So our kids are not moving in the way that they moved before, even if movement wasn't a big part of their day. So talking about how to get some movement in. And then, I think depending on a family and how they feel about things, it's also okay to say, we're all in this together. So there's going to be a little portion of every day where I'm going to need you to help around the house. And obviously that varies by age and by child. But I think if you build those elements in, and I think if you are a family that having dinner together in the evening is feasible and possible, I think that's a really great time to check in. How did your day go? What's going on tomorrow? So that you can tweak as you go. But I think general structure is helpful. This is when we should get up. This is when we should be finished with schoolwork. This is when we're going to kind of come together as a family again at the end of the day. And then the other thing I have kids do is brainstorm a list of stuff. Like I often have them call it my board list. And so let's sit down. What are, because in the moment they're not thinking. And if you're busy on a call, it's really hard then to, find something. So I've got kids who list, puzzles, reading, playing basketball outside, Zooming with a friend.
It's a great idea.
For older children, I then add on the end of that list, and if you can't find anything, here's 3 things to help out around the house. They will very quickly do the other things, which is fine.
That's great.
Well, I've always heard the one thing that we have taken away from our kids, or allowed to be taken away, is boredom. And how that's so important in their development. And somebody posted something the other day about hopscotch. You remember the squares on the chalk and the hop? When's the last time you saw anybody doing something like that?
I definitely have seen kids and talked to kids who are being so much more inventive. It's really, really cool. Some of the meetings I've had with kids, they're excited to show me the fort that they've built, or tell me about the puzzle they're doing with someone in their house. So yeah, I think the brainstorm list is helpful, because if as a parent you're busy working from home and they are accustomed to not being bored, right? They're accustomed to being busy. So if they're needing you and you're busy, it's hard to placate them in that moment or provide something. But I think it is okay for them to kind of think a little bit. And that list can give them an opportunity to think, and then something to refer to if you're not available right at that moment.
I think the boredom list is a great idea, especially that'd be perfect for Marshall.
Yeah.
What about older kids? I see a lot of people posting about high school seniors and, the grief of not seeing those normal activities, graduation, prom, things like that.
Yeah. I think that unfortunately is likely to become a bigger issue as the real reality sets in. I think our high school seniors across the country are savvy and are aware and probably understanding that it's unlikely those things are going to happen, but it's not been official yet.
Right.
And I think once the official message comes down, we're going to see older kids really, really struggling. A few things I've seen that school districts are doing, which is really great, is things like postponing proms, so that proms and those kinds of ceremonies hopefully will still exist for our kids, just at a later date. But that doesn't help in the moment if there's a prom dress hanging up that they don't know when they're going to get to wear. And so I think acknowledging how they're feeling, this really is for them. It was going to be the monumentous thing that happened for them, and they've been kind of waiting for all these years, and it's not going to happen. And so I think really acknowledging that, really understanding and remembering, they don't have the lifelong perspective we all do. So, it does feel very real and very upsetting to them. They can't say, yeah, but, you'll do this and that, and you'll remember high school graduation, but not as much as, having a child or getting married. They can't feel that perspective right now. It's not their reality. So really, really acknowledging it. And then I think, each family individually, again, as it works for your family, trying to come up with ways to create new ways to kind of manage some of those things. You know, I know that I've seen like 16th birthdays, for example, which are, you know, a big deal, and kids usually go get their permit, and they can't.
Right.
So I'm seeing families do, you know, really cool things like setting up online where their friends can record and send them a message. I've seen some of those drive-bys with cars with the big signs in the window. So trying to think of different, it's not the same, and it's going to feel different, but ways that we might be able to mark some of those milestones. We can't replicate a prom, but we can acknowledge for them it's really hard. And we certainly can say, you know, when and if school starts talking about this, we're going to be right there with you to figure this out and see if we can make it happen in a different format.
That's great.
What about, I hear too, I've got one client in particular I'm thinking about, and she's got, I think, 4 kids, and they're in a very intense private school setting. And the work that they're being assigned to do with their kids is so overwhelming that I think she finally did email them and say, we can't keep up with this.
Yeah. It's really hard. Private schools, certainly in Massachusetts, and I assume all over the country, have a different standard. And what I mean by that is that the rules and regulations that public schools are following in terms of public schools are being told that they can't teach new material, that they can't grade. There's a pass fail for high school. So students will get credit, but they're not getting a grade. Those rules just don't apply to private schools. And I have a couple clients also who attend private schools. And so the rigor is really, really intense. What I do think is that teachers at private schools and counselors at private schools are compassionate, caring people, obviously also. And the best thing to do is reach out and connect and say, you know, this is what's going on for our family. This is what we're able to do. This is where we might need some help, and work on an individual basis, because they're putting things out for everybody. But I'm sure, and I found that with my own clients, that schools are open to how can we work together. They recognize that this is a difficult time for everybody.
Are either of you experiencing that, just a lot coming from the school?
Not excessive. In our school district, they're still getting grades, but our district has taken a very proactive approach on kind of regulating what that looks like. And so it's just 1 or maximum 2 grades a week per class. There's, for the most part, you know, not excessively long assignments and whatnot. So it's manageable. The older grades it's a little more challenging than the younger grades, just in level of work and amount. But we haven't had thus far, any situation where I felt like it was just excessive by any means.
Yeah, I think our school has done a really good job of easing the kids into this. They definitely made sure that the kids felt kind of safe and happy first. And they kind of start with, let's do some Zoom calls and just connect. Let's just get used to this. Let's talk about what you've been doing. Let's talk about what you did outside, and just really ease them into, they did a kind of a looser schedule. Then, you know, now it's a little more structured. So I feel like they've done a really good job and been so supportive, you know, of us. So I've been really happy with it.
The teachers have just been amazing.
Yeah.
You know, they do the twice a day call-ins where you can call in and get help with all your assignments. But I mean, at the elementary school, a teacher a day is reading stories to the kids. The music teachers are putting together projects. The hopscotch, Kim, there was a music-based hopscotch that the teacher did one day. But I mean, they still have their morning announcements, but they do them over FaceTime Live. They still recognize the kids for grades last 9 weeks online. So they've done some really incredible things. I mean, that part's been really neat.
Yeah, you mentioned that. It was really fun. We had, they had their first jazz band over. It was such a joy to watch and listen to. I mean, painful too, but it was, but it was so joyous. Like, they were excited, and, you know, and we've had our, you know, PTA group that's done some really fun things too. And they have the kids, they record the kids, you can send it in, and they recite the Pledge of Allegiance, right? So there's some cool things that are actually happening, right? That we'll remember forever.
I think that's a really important piece, and something that I also talk with families about and kids about is so much has changed and so much is different right now, but there are some really neat parts to this. I took it upon myself with any student I talk to or any private client, and I ask them, what's something you're liking right now? What's something that, you're enjoying? And I would say 90% of the kids are saying, my parents are home. Well, the grown-ups who live at my house are home, and we eat dinner or we go for a walk. And kids are talking about being together as a family unit, whatever that unit looks like. That's invaluable. And that's what we want kids to take from this is, what are the things we remember that went well? And, if it's a drive-by birthday parade, or if it's, my favorite teacher read a book and I got to listen to it. And I think teachers, back to your question, about private school, but schools in general, teachers, counselors, whoever's working in a school, they are there to help. They want to help. And all you really have to do is reach out and they will find a way to help. And I think teachers and counselors are being incredibly creative about how to make that happen, and working together. That's the piece, right? The adults at home and the adults at school, and we'll figure it out.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
What advice do you have for those parents? I think they're in every school, but there's so, I don't think this is true of our, who's on the call today, but there are parents out there that are really worried about their kids getting behind. They really want that edge. They want their kids to stay on top and perform well. And this is creating a lot of anxiety for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that particularly older kids, I think especially, and parents of high schoolers in particular, juniors, seniors especially, and also some parents and kids who might attend school where the rigor has been really, really strong. And I think it's very easy to say, it's hard to kind of internalize, but I think the thing we all have to remember is every single child is dealing with this. So, colleges and state boards are going to have to remember that it's not that, a circumstance where, and we wouldn't want this to happen, but if a child were sick and they were out of school for an extended period of time, that is a little bit more tricky. Every single child is dealing with this right now. So one thing, for example, MCAS have been canceled, I think, and they're looking at canceling all SATs for this year, certainly up here anyway. And so I think that we have to remember that when we're parents, and remember that our kids are, if they were performing really well, they're going to continue to do that relative to the other kids in their class, no matter what's been given to them and no matter what they're doing. Because, I think you had mentioned it earlier, if you have a child who, school is important and they work really hard and they perform really well, they're going to bring that and that personality to this extended learning piece. So part of it is taking a breath and stepping back and trusting your child that, they will keep performing at the level that they are at. And then the other piece is, which is really hard because this is where we all get anxious, right? When there's uncertainty and there isn't predictability, which is the case, we're not really sure what's going to happen with education as far as how this is going to play out. I think different schools have different ideas, different states have different ideas, but all kids are going to be starting from the same place. So, if you have a kid who does really, really well, and you're thinking, well, how's that going to work next year? Are they going to be challenged? Those are all the questions that educators are looking to answer as well. So it's not easy to do, but my best advice is take a breath, sit back, trust that your child is going to keep doing what they've been doing, and that educators are going to figure out how to take care of every child. And those kids that have been doing really well, they'll continue to do that.
Good advice. Good advice.
I have a question for both of you. How do we as parents not let our own anxieties show to our kids? And I think it's showing up for everybody differently, probably, I would assume. I'm one that throughout this whole thing has been, I'm fine. I work from home. I'm used to this. This is just fine for me. And then the other day it just hit me like a truck that I realized I saw my friend. I said, I can't hug her. I can't, this is really weird. And, how do you, kids are struggling enough. We don't want to put that on them.
Yeah. I think, step one is kind of what you're already doing, which is taking a minute to check in with yourself and recognize where you are. Because when you do that, then you're able to think about, what do I need? I think as adults, we have to, I often say that as stressors raise, we have to kind of raise our ability to cope with them. So in the way that we talked about a boredom list for kids, I think sometimes it's nice to say, okay, what are the things that nourish me as a person? What are the things that help me? And even making a list of those and saying, have I done any of that today? Or have I done any of that in the last couple of days? So really being, thinking about yourself, thinking about how to nurture yourself. And then something, again, that sort of as a family unit, whoever's at home, finding time together to be sort of grateful and think about what it is that is kind of nourishing you as a family right now. And I talk with families about, and again, I keep saying dinner time, if there's a parent who works at dinner time, you can do it at breakfast, you can do it on your walk, but a moment each day where the people who are spending all this time together talk about what they're grateful for, or talk about what made them happy that day if it's a younger child. And actually, if families are able to do it, the other layer, and what did you do to, and again, I wouldn't use this word with little kids, but enhance somebody else's day. What did you do to make mom happy today? Or because I think that can be nice too. And when we see that what we're doing makes somebody else happy, there's a huge piece there. So it's about caring for yourself and whatever works in your family for you and your family. But those are some ideas that clients of mine are using, and they seem to be really kind of helping just keep the focus on both the things that are going well and the things that are hard, but not only on the things that are hard, which is sort of what we hear in the news all the time right now.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I would just, to add to that, Dominie pretty much said it, but the things that you're advising your kids or helping them do to take care of themselves, you've got to do for yourself. And role modeling that for them is the best example, that you can give. This is tough on everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would try to hide that. I wouldn't, I wouldn't be so cavalier, like this is not affecting you in any way. You just don't want them to think you're panicking or it's out of control or they're not safe. They can know you're having a bad day.
Absolutely.
My kids absolutely know I have anxiety. And the way that we have worded it in my family is, Mom, you're worrying out loud. Meaning I'm kind of pushing my anxiety onto them.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's great.
Yeah. And it's normalizing it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree.
Thank you.
So guys, you guys are in the trenches. And you got an expert here.
I know.
Ask a question, anything. What do y'all want to know? We've covered a lot of topics today. So.
Yeah. I think, talking about, it has been great because we've been together more as a family. One of the things, and I'm a worrier, one of the things I worry about, and I don't know when this will happen, but when things go back to normal, that whole transition and that change, and then, oh my gosh, we're going to grieve something again. We're going to grieve. Our new normal will become our normalcy, and then we're going to switch up again.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah, I think, that's definitely on a lot of people's minds as well as, what will this look like? And I think, it's really difficult because there is no certainty about it. There's no predictability about it. We hear so many different things, and every day you turn the news on, maybe some colleges are not going to go back till January now. Right. And maybe we're going to have rolling quarantine for the next 18 to 20 months. So I think, which is hard for me to do too. It's so, because it's that sort of leap of faith, is just remembering to be in the moment now, remembering to focus where we are now, and trying to say, I trust that when we get to that point, all of the experts, including yourself as a parent, who are working right now and making things work well right now, will come together again and we'll make a new plan. And that plan will take a little time to roll out, just like this one has, and we'll continue to work on the kinks just like we are now. But that sort of faith in the fact that, parents, teachers, counselors, all those people who are around kids, we'll figure it out, because what we care the most about is having our kids be successful and happy.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the things that I just thought of that I think is a big deal for marriages, as this, applies to the family unit. Division of labor is tough for most couples anyway. Yeah. Those who are really good negotiators have worked it out. Oftentimes, though, especially in marriages that aren't quite as good at communication or maybe even healthy in where they are, build up a lot of resentment, and it causes a lot more tension. And so now there's a whole lot more to do.
Mm-hmm.
And both parents are home.
Yeah.
Typically. And if not, if one of them's still going to work, well, then the other parent's home with all of it, all by themselves. And so renegotiating the chores, and, you know, maybe it was the mom's job to help with the homework. Well, now look at that load exponentially. So how do you get both parents engaged in negotiating through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is really important. It's a renegotiation, right? Like it is, hopefully, whenever there is a big shift, you know, in marriages, hopefully there's a renegotiation if a child is born, and then there might be a renegotiation if somebody was working and then isn't working, or vice versa. I think recognizing, although none of us picked this or we're preparing for this, I think that's the big piece here. You know, if you know that you're going back to work, or you know that you're having a baby, you start to maybe have some of those conversations when you're in sort of the excited mode about it, and now we're in it and we need to renegotiate it. So I think it's difficult, but maybe really taking a step back and kind of setting some ground rules for those conversations, and acknowledging, you know, we weren't ready to prepare for this, and we didn't plan for this, but we're here. Mm-hmm. So we do need to look at this for everybody's sake, and maybe we need to look at it as a family unit, not just the adults in the family, obviously depending on the kid's age. Right. But we need to renegotiate as a whole. And what does that look like? And I think sometimes one of the ways I find couples can come together, especially if they do have slightly older kids, is, you know, what do we expect of the kids right now? And then how do we shift what we've been doing as adults? Because if couples have a hard time with these conversations, it might be easier and lower ante to start with, what are we going to expect for the kids? It sort of brings them together, and then we approach the other stuff. And even if it is little kids, it might be, you know, we expect them to clean up their toys. It could be that simple. But again, it provides that communication that's not quite so charged to start with. And then the other thing, which might seem kind of laborious, but I do encourage couples to do, especially if navigating these conversations is tricky, is to write it down. And to say, okay, so this is what we're agreeing to, simply because you don't have to go back and have the same, well, I thought you said this. Nope, I thought I heard that.
Absolutely, write it down.
It just saves that piece. You know, it doesn't mean it's a miracle cure, but I think it saves the piece because you've got a working document to go back to.
Mm-hmm. One thing Kim has told me that sticks with me, I listen, Kim. I do listen.
I'll find out here. What have I said?
If I start complaining, oh, well, you know, he's not doing this, or I'm doing too much. She's like, did you ask for it?
Yes.
Did you? Now I catch myself when I start to have that inner dialogue of complaining. I say to myself, did I actually ask for it? Yeah. It's been really helpful.
I think that's true. And I think that, you know, the renegotiating, it, you know, if it happens at other life milestones, it doesn't just go smoothly. You don't just renegotiate and then everybody goes off and does what they're supposed to. Right. So you have to come back, you have to make time. And I think that's another piece. We are all home together with kids of varying ages, adults who, you know, whatever the combination of adults is, and it could be a mother and a grandmother, or it could be, you know, a couple, need time to sit down and say, how are we doing with what's different right now? You know, my husband had said to me the other day, listen, I know we talked about you going grocery shopping, but I'm the one who is out going to work. It doesn't make sense to expose you. So, you know, I'll do my best if you give me a list. So what do I need to do? I need to be able to sit back and say, okay, he's not going to know how to substitute this for that.
Right.
So whatever he brings home, I will work with. But what he was saying was really, you know, helpful. He's already coming home and making sure that he takes a shower and is clean because he's been out in the world. It doesn't make sense for two of us in one day to be exposed in that way. So revisiting is important too.
You know, one area we've not covered is the college kids who are back home. See, my husband and I are new to empty nesting. Mm-hmm. And that was such a huge adjustment. You know, you're trucking along, you're being a parent, you're figuring out how to couple during that. And then, you know, one goes to college, your heart's ripped out. you figure it out, and then the other one goes, and now the house is empty. And then just when we're like, oh, this is great, we're having a good time, then they're both back. And it's like, I love them, but I miss my empty nest.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I have a couple of clients who are college aged, and I actually have said to them, and I believe this, that they're the ones, to be honest, who have the biggest adjustment. And what I mean by that is they had signed up for a completely different life right now. You know, I signed up to be a mom and have children and a husband. So there's an adjustment there, no doubt. We're all home together, but that's what I signed up for. They signed up to go away to school and have a life of independence and grow their responsibility and make mistakes. And all of a sudden they're back home. And so again, I've encouraged them to have open conversations with parents about that. To talk about, you know, what's important to them. What I'm finding is it's really important to them to still feel like they have some semblance of independence. And so some negotiating around when they get up, as long as they get things done, and when they might need some quiet space, because the rigor of college has not shifted. Colleges, in my experience from people I'm talking to, have done a really nice seamless job of sliding to online, and the rigor is pretty much the same, and in some ways harder. So really checking in with your college student about how they're doing and what they're doing, and then giving permission to go to your corners. It's okay. You know, it's okay that it's Saturday night and we're in all different rooms doing our own thing. You know, yes, we need to check in. Yes, we should see how we're doing and care for each other, but they're not used to being in home anymore. And so remembering that is really important, and that they are going to want to spend more time connecting with their friends, because that is where they've been. You know, and
You're
like
right.
I
should focus on their pain and their change.
and you know what?
My pain.
But you know what's interesting, and again, you know, I'm not quite there yet. But the thing that I think is interesting is, you know, when they come home, again, we sort of adjust back to, well, when they were home, we had dinners together or we did things together. It's us not falling back into those routines as well, and saying, you know what, it's great if we have dinner together 3 nights a week and we really catch up and we're really, you know, I kind of have some good conversation. And the other nights, guys, you know, either you're going to, depending on the family, you're going to kind of do your thing and fend for yourself, or I'm going to cook. There'll be something in the kitchen. I just ask that you clean up after yourselves, and not quite put those kind of constraints, because that's how it starts to feel them on. Because it's not where they are developmentally even.
Yeah, they're moving back home physically, but that doesn't mean they're back home developmentally where they've been.
Right.
So we've
and in fairness to them, nor should they be, really. You know?
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been great.
Yeah.
I appreciate so much your willingness to show up and do this. Dominie, you've been a joy. Thank you for.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's, you know, really nice to chat.
Yeah. And we're going to post some contact information for you if anybody has any further questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Becca and Kelly, you all are just champs. Thanks so much for being willing to jump on here at the last minute. I just get a wild hair, and you know how things happen in my world. So
yeah,
I appreciate it. All right, guys. So we're going to sign off. All you viewers out there, keep in touch and pay attention to what we're doing. We've got some cool things coming up to share with you on anxiety and grief, and how to be nutritionally and physically fit during COVID isolation. So that's going to be a fun one. So yeah, looking forward to that. So we'll see everybody another time.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.